The scary stories will start in 45 seconds. Before they do, I just want to remind you to subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet. I know that ads can ruin the mood when you're trying to relax and listen to the stories, and in all of my videos, there are minimal ads, and there always will be. In this video, there are only 2 mid-roll ads. There's one after the first story, and one after the second. And that's it. So again, if you enjoy my videos and want to show your support to this channel, please subscribe and hit the thumbs up. It helps me so much. Now, let's begin. This took place about 10 years ago when I was a freshman in college. This is the first time I've recounted this story in full detail to anyone. I attended college in a rural, mountain area in the Northeast, a small school tucked away in the rolling hills of the mountains, the type of place where the beauty and casual grace of nature is juxtaposed by the ugliness of humanity, and you couldn't venture too deeply into the woods beyond a few trees without seeing some trace of meth activity. One of my new friends from college discovered somehow an abandoned train trestle deep in the woods about 5 miles from campus. I don't remember how he found this place because it was very much off the beaten path. The trestle crossed above a river which placidly flowed about 40 feet below. It was actually quite beautiful, and we began going there maybe 3 times a week, just chilling on the trestle, watching the water below and the open sky above. We would drink, smoke, and bring girls there. We began jumping off the trestle into the water below, and then climbing back up. It was just a very college-y thing to do. Basically our chill spot. So one day, just needing to get away from the dorms and away from it all, I decided to go by myself to the trestle for a swim. It was about 7 p.m., so I still had a good hour or so of dim sunlight, and I brought a flashlight for the walk home when it was sure to be dark. I made the trek through the pathways of the woods, as I had done 100 times before, left my towel and flashlight on the trestle, and jumped into the water. The water was about 10 to 15 feet deep, I'd say. It flowed almost imperceptibly. You might as well be swimming in a stagnant pool. However, about maybe 50 yards away from the trestle, the river narrows, and the current picks up significantly. Then, about 20 yards after that, there is a maybe 20-foot-high waterfall that bubbles and splashes with extreme violence. We used to watch large objects go over and never come up again. So there I am, dimly bobbing my head in and out of the water, doing underwater flips, etc. When I pop my head out of the water, I happen to glance to the side of the river and see a man walking towards the water. The water is kind of impeding my view, so I don't see him fluidly walking towards the water. I more see him in different stages of being closer to the water, like flipping through a flip book. He is 15 feet away, then 10 feet away, then 5 feet away. I can barely give you a description. Maybe 6 feet tall, black hair that looked to be pulled back into a ponytail. What I do remember most about his appearance was the extremely empty look on his face and in his eyes, like he was doing something mundane, taking out the trash or raking leaves. I'm treading water, not knowing what to think, and I see that he is no longer beside the river. He has dove in and is swimming pin straight directly at me. So fast. I try to swim the opposite way, but within a minute, I feel him grab my ankle and tug. I tried to scream, but water filled my mouth. While I'm underwater, he lets go and goes up for air, then grabs back on and pulls me again. It seems like he's done this before, and I never once see him after he jumped in the water. He's gradually pulling me to where the current picks up before the waterfall. I start to realize this and start flipping out, kicking, screaming, cursing, to no effect. Finally, I feel the current start to take me, and as I twist away towards the waterfall, I see this guy just casually swimming back to where he jumped in the water, not even looking at me. This is by far the scariest moment of my life as I approach the waterfall. Long story short, I go over and am underwater for a long time, over a minute. The water above unrelentingly pushing me under. The only reason I survived was there was a large log that had gone over, and I grabbed it and used it as leverage against the bottom to push me away from the crushing water. I survive, obviously. But then, I had to trek the miles back to my dorm, in the dark, without my flashlight. Every step of the way thinking that he would come back to finish the job. This was by far the most bizarre, random, and scary thing that's ever happened to me. I have no idea who the guy was, or why he suddenly decided to try and kill me. I have had so many nightmares of this incident since it happened. I have had sleep paralysis off and on my whole life. Usually happens a couple times a year and only lasts one episode. I force myself awake and the fear fades once I realize there wasn't anything to be afraid of, and then I'm good to go. This is different. The first time it happened, right before it happened, there was this ungodly loud buzzing drone that started behind my head. It was deep and groaning and so loud, I can't express it. I swear I could actually feel vibrations in my chest. It got kind of all-encompassing. I was already feeling that familiar fear, and now there was this horrible ambient refrain, like a horror movie. It really ramps up the tension, I tell you what. So I started my ritual of rapidly fluttering my eyelids and trying to come out of it. And I did. I was basking in relief, breathing heavily, and I hear my mom doing dishes and cooking. She's talking the whole time, and I got this sense of wrongness. I was so sleepy and fuzzy, but I used all my willpower to focus on my surroundings. The kitchen sounds are being recycled, like the audio version of a cartoon background. Water on, water off, microwave open, shut. Silverware jingle, water on, off, open, shut, jingle, etc. Also, my mom isn't really talking. It's just a soothing mumble of nonsense. Nonsense that I'm hearing behind me, where there is no kitchen, only a wall. The kitchen was in that area where I used to live, but not here. I blurt out, "I don't live there anymore. You're not my mom." The noise is cut off. She says something now, whispers it right behind me. "Then look at me." I do not. At some point I actually wake up. I don't know how many cycles of dreams within dreams, separated by the buzzing I went through. At least 10, but they are so close to reality that I'm not sure. It happened the next night too, but I didn't see or hear anything scarier than the buzz. Tonight I get in bed. I'm feeling good, and suddenly the buzzing hits. I struggle, wake, and my brother walks in the front door with groceries. He doesn't acknowledge or face me, only hustles past and goes into my parents' pitch-black room. I decided to scare him by sticking my arms out and shuffling in there moaning, "Brains." I know, not a great prank, but that's what happened. I stumble in. He isn't there, and I hear the buzzing start, louder and louder. At the same moment, that familiar fear floods over me. I start fluttering my eyelids, and then I got really upset. Screw this. I'm so tired of this. No more fighting it. It was ridiculously hard to stand there in a deafening roar of noise and fear and I actually give in. I just let myself go. I was going to ride it out. That was a mistake. My mother came out of the closet with absolute menacing purpose, and the buzzing stopped. This time, I looked at her. Her jaw was hanging open too far, and her arms were so long that her fingers were dragging limply across the carpet. They were pale and bloated, and all I could hear was the dry rustle of them on Berber. That awful empty mouth got bigger and bigger while I struggled as hard as I could to wake up. Wake up! Wake up! And so I did. I woke up. I think. This past weekend, I went out on a date with an old friend from high school and was dropped back off at home at around 11:30 p.m. I live in a 2-story apartment building located near the outer edge of town in a small residential area, and usually by this time, the streets are empty and it's very quiet. I entered inside through the front door and began up the stairs. I was 3 or 4 steps from the top of the stairwell when I saw somebody I've never seen before, sitting down on the floor with his back leaning against my apartment door, looking down at what I first thought was a phone, but was actually a box cutter, which he was playing around with. I was flabbergasted and quietly asked if he would move so I could get inside, but he did not acknowledge my presence. I quietly walked back down the stairs and knocked on a fellow tenant's door, but didn't get an answer. I tried again on 3 others when somebody finally opened up. I told him about the creepy guy with the box cutter, and he agreed to help me out and to have the police on the phone if anything were to escalate, or if the man refused to leave. We both went up the stairs and the guy was still sitting there, messing around with his box cutter. I stood there, observing, while the other tenant demanded that he move out of the way, or else. Once again, no answer. Not even a change in facial expression. I walked back down the stairs and dialed the closest department, and they were going to send a trooper over as soon as they could. After sitting outside for a few minutes, and still talking to dispatch, the man must have finally realized that he wasn't welcome, and I watched as he walked right past me, out of the apartment building and onto the street, before disappearing into the distance. When the police arrived, they took statements from me and the other tenant, while another one of their units drove around to try and locate the man, which they did. However, because he wasn't breaking any laws, they weren't able to take action against him, but assured us that he would be charged with trespassing if he ever came back. One time when I was a pretty young kid, I'd say 7 or 8, late at night I woke up because I heard some weird stuff happening outside, scuffling and odd noises. I climbed up onto the dresser in my room to peek out my window, which gave me a good visual of our backyard gate, which was chain link and directly adjacent to the front door of the house, which it was a weird ranch, so the front door was on the side of the house. Our Rottweiler was making low, huffing barks and growls, but sounded really strange, and pawing at the ground. This much I could see in the moonlight. Everyone else in the house was asleep, and I moved into the room next to mine, a den, and I climbed up onto the back of a couch to look out that window. It put me probably 20 feet closer, and I could now see that there was a man on all fours, pawing and imitating the dog's barks back at him on the other side of the chain link fence from my dog. I went into my parents' bedroom, which was scary because I was always on strict instruction not to bother them at night. Bad parenting, in my opinion, because I took that to heart and questioned if this was worth bothering them. I guess I had been a pest with waking up in the night, so I was told basically if you wake up and aren't on fire, don't bother us. But I felt uneasy enough that I went to my parents' room. I stood next to my sleeping father and said, "Dad, there's a man outside barking at the dog." My father, in his sleepy state, said something like, "You're dreaming. We told you to cut this out." And then I said back, "No, I'm serious." So he gets up and peeks out the den window and then flies into motion. There is actually a guy out there. But now, he isn't barking at the dog. He is trying to enter the front door. We had an iron security door in front of the regular door, and the guy was now rattling it wildly. My dad grabbed his shotgun and flung the inner door open and screamed, "Can I help you?" The guy at this point ramps up the rattling and starts screaming, "I'm here for the party. I was just here. Let me back in." My dad realizes the guy is drunk or otherwise altered, or just a nut, and instructs my mom to call the police. The cops are called, and my mom is explaining that there is a drunk crazy man trying to force his way into our house. I'm hung back around the corner watching, but also hiding. My dad is still at the door holding the shotgun. The crazy guy now returns to the gate and resumes barking at my dog, who I think has now picked up on our fear and the tension, and he is getting mad, snarling, trying to bite the guy through the fence. The police showed up remarkably fast, it seemed, and are up the driveway screaming at my father to drop the shotgun and put his hands up. The guy now turns around from barking at the door and tells the police that they need to help him. My parents have locked him out of the house, and his stuff is inside. The police look at my parents in night clothes, me clutching the wall, and our dog in a frenzy. The drunk nut realizes this isn't going his way and makes a break to run. One of the two cops clotheslined him into the side of the house. The guy wrestled trying to get away and got punched in the face and cuffed. The kicker to this story is that while this was happening, directly across the street was a party where this guy would have just strolled right back in and been happy and high. As they were leaving, he screamed out, "Oh, it was that house over there." My dog got some treats for trying to kill the intruder, and I got a little bit more credibility. My parents didn't just ignore any insane thing I said anymore, so it was a win-win all around. I have been in therapy since this happened, and I sleep with the lights on and cannot be home alone. Here is what happened to me on May 23rd, 2017. In my neighborhood, we had a few burglaries. I work from home, and I am usually home alone with my son. We live near a busy mall, and our good neighborhood, even though is a pretty good area, is close to highways and has 3 ungated entrances, so it makes it easy for people to break in, steal, and get out before police come. I scare pretty easily, so hearing an alarm going off nearby, seeing the police helicopter circle above, and having the neighborhood swarming with cop cars always freaks me out. We had a spree of guys going into unlocked cars and stealing stuff. I mention this because there were 25 cars they were able to get into. Our area is the kind where you can leave your door unlocked, and usually nothing happens. At this point, it has been petty theft. Nothing major has been stolen, and no one had been hurt. So for the next few months, everyone is pissed. We all feel really violated by what has been happening. Homeowners' meetings are packed, and everyone wants to put a stop to crime going on in our neighborhood. It is soon revealed they had undercover cop cars throughout the neighborhood, waiting to make a bust. Up until this point, it was pretty scary. Also, at this point, no one was getting hurt. At least, not physically. Our neighborhood watch sent information to make sure alarms are on, windows and doors are locked, and if a car is in the driveway, more than likely, burglars will skip your home. Just lock your car doors. Since I work from home, my car is always in the driveway. One afternoon in April, my son and I were on a walk. It was a nice day, and about 2 blocks from our house, the cop cars came rushing in. I was told to get back to my house as soon as possible. An officer actually escorts us to the door and lets me know to lock up. There are 3 armed assailants on the run between my street and the next. They broke into 2 houses. In one, a woman was home alone, and the 3 men tied her up and abused her. They broke into a second home, and they pistol whipped a man that was home. The next week, a woman was nearly kidnapped on a 6 a.m. run on my street. The fear was real at this point. Going out alone during the day or night wasn't happening. None of these criminals were caught. But then, things died down. Usually every couple days there was a break-in. There was nothing after this in early April. In late May, I had to take my car into the dealership for some work. I was left without a car for 2 days. To keep my son busy, we would go on long walks to the mall with 2 other moms and kids in the morning and then go swimming in our pool in the afternoon. A lot of the stay-at-homes grouped together because of the fear of the recent things going on. This day, it was actually pretty nice out, so I had all of our sliding glass doors open and I was letting the house air out. While I was bathing my son, I got a funny feeling, so I rushed and locked all the doors and blinds as quickly as possible. Even though it is in our backyard, I didn't feel safe leaving them open, with me down the hall in the bathroom. Just as I was walking away from the last door, I see 2 large men entering my backyard on our security camera in the kitchen. We have 3 stations in our house where you can see the feed from the cameras inside and outside. We have 1 in our bedroom, 1 in the office, and 1 in the kitchen. My husband does security systems, so he set us up with the most elaborate and expensive unit. We have 2 padlocks on the gate, so I was pretty freaked out that they were able to get in. These men are big, at least 6 feet, and around 220 pounds, give or take. I am 5'3" and 140 pounds. I am not that tiny, but I would be no match for these guys. The guys are trying to look through the windows, so I edge back into the bathroom and realize that I left my cell phone outside by the pool, so I cannot call anyone or get any attention from outside of my house. All I have is my work phone in the office that needs to be booted up to be used. I was on vacation for the week, so the system was shut down the entire time. I grab my son, his diaper bag, and we make our way into my office. The room is pretty soundproof. You have to be screaming for it to be heard outside. It has access to the security cameras and where you can actually hear audio from the cameras, and it has a heavy-duty lock on the door. My husband set it up so that it could be used as a panic room if we ever needed it. It is hidden in our garage, and unless you turn on all the lights in the garage, you have to walk around his tool bench on a high shelf, and if you're not looking, you may not even realize there is another room there. My son thankfully falls asleep on the rug in the room. As I am freaking out, watching these guys as they use a little hammer to break the sliding glass door to enter my bedroom, I am getting the computer started up to call the police. Once they are inside, I am only able to see them in the living room, kitchen, and my son's room. They are going into all 5 bedrooms of my house, rummaging through closets and drawers. The larger of the men walks into the living room. He has my cell phone in his hand, and he literally looks at the camera in the living room and waves with my phone in hand. He then opens his bag and pulls out a knife, rope, and duct tape. He then says, "Hey, pretty mommy, where are you hiding? We want to have some fun with you." I realize these guys aren't here to steal stuff. I finally am able to call the cops. They tell me to stay secured in the room, turn out the lights, stay on the line, and be as quiet as possible. These guys are tearing my house apart, and they are calling my name, looking for me. They even start calling my son's name. This really scares me. How do they know our names? One of these guys actually started eating the chicken that I baked for dinner. They make their way into the garage, and they are looking around. I can only see a little from the kitchen camera. I am praying they don't turn on the lights to see the entrance to the office in the corner of the garage. I am whispering into the phone, keeping the dispatcher up to date on what I am seeing on the security feed. She tells me the cops are 4 minutes away. The guys are now rummaging through the garage. I hear them playing with my husband's power tools. My son wakes up and surprisingly doesn't start crying. He quietly looks at me, sucking his thumb. I know what these guys have in mind for me, but I am so scared to think what they are going to do to my son. That single thought brings me to tears. I bring my son into the closet of the room with a flashlight, bottle, and blanket, and I mouth for him to be quiet and shut the door. The dispatcher tells me the cops are 3 minutes away. Her name is Janice. I beg her to tell them to hurry up. She tells me to keep calm and that she is there with me. She recommends that I get in the closet as well. I don't, because I don't want them to think about my son if they break through the door. Then, the guys start pounding on the office door. These guys are pulling at the door, and it sounds like they are throwing their weight into it. I hear my husband's power saw. At this point, the bigger guy screams, "I know you and the baby are in there. You should have just come out when we came in." I am literally shaking and praying the door and lock hold up. I move a dresser in front of the door. No idea why, but it is what they do in the movies. I then pushed the futon in the room against the dresser, just praying the weight on the door would keep them out. I tell the dispatcher what is going on, and she tells me the cops are here, breaking through my front window. I look at the security system, and sure enough, there looks to be 4 or 5 cops at my door. The rest was a blur, and it felt like it was forever with all the noises of taking the guys down. And then, silence. I was sobbing and rocking in the dark with my son in my arms, who still sat there quietly hugging me and patting my back. Soon, I heard a knock on the door. It was a female officer. It took me a moment to open the door, and I didn't even realize I still had Janice on the phone. The guys were arrested. They were caught with a large amount of cocaine, meth, and roofies on them. The cops later disclosed that they had been stalking me for a few weeks. They knew I was home all along, and I was the next victim on their list. I am so thankful they didn't get to me, because I have no idea if I would still be here to tell this story. We actually were able to sell our house 2 months ago, and we are moved out of state. Our new neighborhood has a gated entrance. My house has security cameras in every room, and I have a gate around the entire property. This was back in the 1990s, and I was a single mom and picked up a Saturday night bartending job at a place that was off the highway on a frontage road not immediately close to anything, but in between some pretty large towns in the affluent suburbs north of Chicago. This place was hopping after work hours, but sadly, not on Saturday nights, and I would often find myself alone or with only a handful of customers. This particular night was dark, rainy, and a thunderstorm was raging outside. In walks this rugged, handsome man, windswept blonde hair, crystal blue eyes, nice build, and he sits at the bar. It's just the two of us, and I walk over to take his drink order. He orders, and I make the drink, and he puts $2.25 on the bar. I hand him the drink and realize that he didn't give me enough money. So I tell him that I need another quarter because the drink is $2.50. Mind you, we are alone in this good-sized bar. It's a dark night, and thunder and lightning are raging outside. It's not close to any other businesses that I could run to or where other people might be. And he looks at me straight in the eye and calmly says, "I am Satan. Tell me what you really want. I can give you anything you want. What is it that you really want?" At this point, I'm shaking in my shoes, not sure how I even respond. I look back at him and say, "I want another quarter for your drink, and I want you to stop being scary." He gave me the quarter, downed his drink, and walked out. I had to close up alone, and believe me, I was on edge until the following morning. I didn't work there much longer after that. These events took place over a couple months. It still haunts me to this day, and is a lot of the reason why I am the way I am. A little backstory. I have 5 siblings, and there are 6 of us total. When this happened, my oldest brother was 14, so I would have been 3 at the time, given that we are 11 years apart, and I'm the baby of the family. This happened at a very fragile time in my parents' marriage. My dad definitely wasn't the best father and had cheated on my mother a number of times. For the record, I have asked my siblings to write this since they were older, but no one has, so I will recount it to the best of my ability. There was so much more that happened, but I will talk about 3 occurrences that stuck with me. I was eating something with my sister, watching TV with her at night, and the rest of my siblings. My parents were not home. We only had 1 car at the time, and my mom had to go pick my dad up and leave us at home sometimes. I remember going into the kitchen to throw something away with my sister. We had a big window in the kitchen, and the garbage was right beside it. My sister screamed, and we both noticed a man's face pressed up against the glass, looking in with a flashlight and smiling. We both ran into the other room to tell the rest of my siblings. We all quickly stopped watching TV and stayed together upstairs. My mother soon got home, and we told her what happened. She flipped out, called the cops, and also told my neighbors to keep an eye out. This happened a number of times, and it turned out to be multiple men. They always seemed to get away right before the cops got to us, or right before my mom got home. I remember her cutting down the bushes in front of our house because these men would hide inside them. I also remember them breaking one of the windows in our kitchen at one point. On a separate night, I remember being alone with my 1 brother and 1 sister closest in age to me. They would have been 4 and 6. I don't know why we were alone, but I remember it distinctly. The men came back and were pounding on our front door and throwing things at our windows. All 3 of us ran into my parents' room upstairs and locked the door. I remember crying with my sister and my brother telling us not to, that we could pretend to be other people, brave people, so that we wouldn't be scared anymore. It definitely worked. My parents got home soon after. We were literally on lockdown at this point, and I was terrified of everyone. My brother tells me one night the phone rang, right when my mom had left to get my dad, and he answered it, and it was one of the men, and he laughed and said, "You people are so stupid," and hung up. One of the last nights that this went on, I remember being in bed and my sister waking me up and taking me with her to the landing of our stairs. Our stairs faced our front door, and my brother was sitting on the landing, pointing a shotgun at the front door, and all my siblings were huddled beside him. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew whatever was happening was bad. I sat down next to my siblings, and no one talked. I remember having a stupid T-Rex toy I was playing with. It was as if time had stood still. But then, there it was. The men banging on our front door and yelling things outside. I don't know why, or if the men had done it, but our front door was unlocked. It felt like forever when finally my brother spoke, and all he said was, "Come in," while pointing the shotgun. All the sounds stopped, and we waited. But no one came through the door. The cops came soon after all of this and told us they had news. Apparently, our phone lines were being tapped. That's how the guys always knew when we were alone at the house. I don't know if the cops knew or charged any of the men with anything. My mom doesn't like talking about it because she's a different person than she was 20 years ago. Now that I'm older, I realize we never should have been left alone at that time. Period. But my mom was not well. She was madly in love with my dad and was obsessed with making sure he wasn't cheating. A lot of the time that this was going on, she wasn't picking him up. She was watching him at work and making sure he wasn't cheating, all while leaving the 6 of us alone to fend for ourselves. I realize how insanely selfish this is, but I have forgiven my mom for it. She's still with my dad, and I'm working on a better relationship with both of them. Looking back on it, it doesn't even feel real. After all, we found out all this happened from a psycho that my dad cheated with, who got her loser middle-aged guy friends to terrorize a bunch of children. For the record, I found this woman and sent her the nastiest message a few years ago when I turned 19. This stuff keeps me up at night. I'm hyper alert to sounds, and I am extremely paranoid at night, especially when I'm alone. These people impacted my life in such a way they'll never know. But through it all, my siblings and I have remained so close, and I've always been very proud of my brother for stepping up and caring for us the way he did. He still tries to this day to be our protector, though we have all grown up. I now realize what's important is that none of us were hurt, because it could have gone so terribly wrong in so many ways. I wonder if that guy would have come in, and I also wonder what these loser guys are doing now that they're in their 50s. Regardless, I hope I never see them again. This happened back when I was in 4th grade. It's always stuck out to me as odd, but when I became an adult, it dawned on me just how dangerous it was. I had been invited to a friend's birthday party, which was to be held at a popular pizza joint that had a bunch of arcade games and stuff. This pizza place was right next door to a small movie theater, and the movie Titanic had just come out. So there was a decent amount of people in this part of the shopping center. My mom had to run some errands and pick up one of my other brothers, so she dropped me off along the way. She said she was going to stay until others arrived for the party, but I knew she had a lot to do. The place was familiar to me, and I knew my friends were either already inside or would be there shortly, so I just told her to drop me off, and I went inside. My mom had also arranged a ride home for me from one of my friend's parents. No one had gotten there yet, so I took a look around at the different games, and then went outside the restaurant to wait for my friends to show up. There were a bunch of people outside the theater, lined up, waiting to get inside for the early evening showing of Titanic. That's when I noticed that a couple, guy and girl, were standing by a car smoking cigarettes and looking over at me. A chunk of time had passed, probably like 20 minutes, and I was super confused why my friends hadn't shown up yet. I knew for a fact that I was at the right place, and that I had shown up at the right time. I was going over all the reasons why they might be late when the cigarette-smoking couple came over to me and started talking to me. They asked me what or who I was waiting for. Obviously, at first, I was hesitant to talk to strangers, but they looked to be my oldest brother's age, in their early 20s, so I had been around older people and wasn't too bashful or shy around them. I explained to them that I was waiting for my friends to show up for a birthday party, but they hadn't shown up yet, and they were all pretty late. The couple made some other small talk, but they told me they were wanting to see Titanic, but when they showed up, all of the tickets had sold out for the showing that they wanted, so they were just going to hang out until the next showing. After a little while longer of waiting and talking with this couple, they asked if I was hungry. I said I was, and they offered to buy me pizza. As a hungry kid who was seriously looking forward to pizza, but was unsure if the party was still going to happen, I wasn't about to pass it up. We went inside and ordered, and sat down. I ended up hanging out with this couple for a long time. They were being super nice to me, gave me money for the arcade games, bought me as much pizza and soda as I wanted. I had almost completely forgotten about my friends and the party that was supposed to happen, until I saw what time it was. Almost 2 hours had passed, and I started to get pretty nervous and anxious. I wasn't sure how I was going to get home. I didn't have a cell phone, as this was in 1997, and neither did my parents. My mom would be furious that A, no one showed up to the party, and B, I didn't seek out help from the restaurant, or some kind of security guard or police officer. And C, I had spent the last 2 hours with strangers, accepting food and money from them. I decided to ask this couple what I should do. This is where things started to get really strange. The guy turned to me and said flatly, "You don't need to go home." Thinking back, I definitely couldn't fully comprehend the weight of what he said. I didn't know what to say, so I kind of shrugged in confusion and said that I needed to find a phone. I went up to the counter and asked if I could use their phone, and they let me. I called home, but no one answered. I tried again. Still nothing. I then told the people at the counter that I was trying to get picked up, but no one was answering the phone. I must have looked pretty panicked, because just then, the guy, from the couple, came over and put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Don't worry, we'll get this figured out." He then gave me some more money to play a few more arcade games, while he figured it out with the guys behind the counter. No idea what they talked about specifically, but I ended up playing another game and then went back to the table we were at. The guy came back over and said that they were going to take me home. He was being super positive and upbeat about it, and was insisting that it was no problem whatsoever. His girlfriend was also being very insistent and supportive of the idea. Part of me was super hesitant because I was taught stranger danger and all that, but the other part of me was wanting to believe that it was all really innocent, and I was really grateful that these people had been so nice to me, fed me, and kept me entertained. They had even missed their movie to stay with me. I said that I wanted to try calling home a few more times, so over the next 15 to 20 minutes, I tried calling home, but there was still no answer. I decided that I would say yes to these people and have them take me home. Again, I was young, impressionable, naive, etc. The people behind the counter must have been seeing this from the more rational side and realized something seriously fishy was going on. One of them had gone on break and called the police to come over and address the situation. The policeman shows up and comes over to figure out what's going on. I don't remember everything about the conversation, but what it ended up coming down to was who was going to take me home. The couple was still really insistent. Thinking about this as an adult now, I find it strange that the cop was even considering letting this whole thing be an option. As an adult, there is no question in my mind that the cop should have shut the conversation down and taken me home. But for some odd reason, they let me decide. I felt like I was being pressured. I remember going back and forth in my mind. These people had been so nice to me and had hung out with me, and I didn't want to be rude, and I also felt really intimidated by the police officer. I remember this part as if it were yesterday. As I was thinking, the cop went over to talk to some of the guys behind the counter, and while he was away, the guy from the couple looked at me with a smile and asked, "Do you want to go home with him or us?" I told him I would go with them. Again, in hindsight, I still can't believe the cop let this happen. As we were getting our things to go, the officer did say that he was going to follow us the whole way, which was a redemptive assurance. The officer asked for my address and my parents' names. I got in the couple's car and told them where I lived, and we were on our way. The girl was driving, and the guy was in the front passenger seat. The entire drive, the guy was looking over his shoulder, out the back window, glancing back and forth between me and the cop following us. We pulled up to my house, and I went up to the front door while both the couple and the cop were parked on the street. Opened the door, went inside, and saw that my mom was looking out the window with a very confused and concerned look on her face. She went outside and found out all that had happened, and was furious. I didn't tell her the specific things that the couple had said to me. Again, I didn't understand the full gravity of the whole situation until years later. Going through the whole scenario in my head, if the cop hadn't followed us, I more than likely would have been abducted. Thinking about all the things that had to be done and said, befriending me, and feeding me, and giving me money to play games, was them totally trying to come across as disarming and trusting and friendly. A totally messed up situation that could have been so much worse. It's hard to think about it. I'm almost 30 now, and have kids of my own, and thinking about them in this kind of situation makes my blood boil. Summer of 2004. My family was supposed to vacation in Maine. My father was stuck in meetings, so he was going to come up from Manhattan a few days after us. My mom wanted to drive up, but we didn't have a choice, and my brother, sister, and I loaded into the car and started the drive. I was about 14 at the time. The drive was uneventful, but there were various delays, and we ended up getting in a lot later than originally planned. Because of this, the owners of the house we were renting had turned in for the night, and we weren't able to get a hold of them to get the keys. Sounds like horrible planning, but apparently they were pretty strict about the time frame to pick up the keys. Obviously, my mom, unfazed, decided that she wanted lobster, so we went to one of our favorite spots. She called my dad to see if he could make us reservations at a hotel from New York City while we ate. We were enjoying the lobster when a guy came up and started chatting with my mom. I figured it was just a friendly local making conversation. During this, my dad calls my mom, and my mom excuses herself to speak to him. Apparently, all hotels were booked for the night. Go figure. The plan was for us to drive to the nearest town and just find somewhere to stay until we could pick up the keys for our vacation home. Apparently, the local had been listening into my mom's conversation and came back over once she got off the phone. I want to say there was nothing outwardly off about him. He was preppy, clean-cut, unassuming, and fit in with the clientele. He told my mom he had a big home with a big guest house and that we were more than welcome to stay, and his wife wouldn't mind. Immediately, my reaction was F that. No way in the world I was staying in a random guy's house in creepy Maine in the dark. No offense to anyone from Maine, but the streets get creepy. My mom, doing her due diligence, determined the guy was legit, said that he was in finance, and they chatted enough for my mom to determine that he wasn't totally full of it. I called my dad hysterical. He said I was overreacting, and that I needed to get out of the city more, and accept that sometimes people are just nice. So my brother, sister, and I got into the car and followed him back to his house. The guest house was really nice, fully furnished, but the beds were oddly placed. The guest house had 2 bedrooms, and instead of the beds being located in the middle, centered, they were right under the window in each room. Just seemed out of place. Anyway, fast forward, we are all getting ready to go to bed. My mom hears a knock on the door, and it's the guy. He said he just wanted to check to make sure we got settled. Cool, nice thing to do. About 30 minutes later, he comes back to check in again. At this point, my mom was like, "Thanks, we're good. We will stop by the house in the morning to say thank you, etc." Fast forward another 30 minutes. I can't sleep. I'm terrified. We hear this rustling, which is odd because the guest house was nowhere around trees or close proximity to bushes that might cause such a noise. At this point, I see my mom wide awake and look up at the window, like motioning towards the window with her eyes. Let me add, none of the windows had curtains. The guy said it's because his wife was in the process of redecorating. When I looked up, there was a male figure just standing there. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I don't know how long he was there for. When he walked away, my mom waited a bit and then told us to get our stuff together. She wasn't messing around. We had my dad on the phone at this point. He was pretty much flipping out at my mom about something, but I didn't hear what. My mom said she was going to put stuff in the car and to follow her out. This was around 2 a.m. When we got into the car, we pulled around to the front of the main house so that my mom could return the key, say thanks, and so that we could leave. However, when we got to the front, all of the lights were off. Not just all lights, but it looked like no one had been home. Porch light, table lamp in front windows, everything black. Also, the 2 cars were gone, the local's car and what we presumed to be his wife's car. After seeing this, my mom at this point, pretty unsettled, said that we were leaving, and we proceeded to drive to the gate. The gate at the end of the driveway had been deadbolted, padlocked shut from the inside. It wasn't a super strong gate, so my dad said drive through it and just get out of there. We were in a big SUV. We did, and then drove straight back to New York City, not speaking the entire time. We have never returned back to Maine, and my parents refuse to speak about it. I asked a family member one night about it when he was drunk, and all he said was, "They didn't tell you?" The actual owners of that house were on vacation. I'm assuming my mom or dad followed up with the local authorities and figured that out, but never told us. I don't know who that man was, or what his plans were that evening. I was curious as to whether there was any known serial killers who were in the area at that time. I guess I'll never know. Hey, this is Being Scared. Please consider subscribing if you aren't subscribed already. I promise I will never stop making these videos for you, and there will always be minimal ads.